My name is Mackenzie Thompson, and I was 28 when my holiday spirit died on my Aunt Laura's doorstep. Standing there with homemade pie and carefully wrapped gifts, I watched her face harden as she opened the door. The words stuck like ice. "We don't want you here. Go ruin someone else's holiday through the doorway." I glimpsed my entire family laughing around the table. I just nodded, turned around, and said, "Got it." 10 minutes later, my dad burst through that same door yelling my name. Before I tell you about that fateful Christmas night, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button if you've ever felt betrayed by the very people who should love you most, and subscribe to join our community of survivors who've learned that sometimes leaving is the first step toward healing. Growing up in the Thompson family always felt like walking on eggshells, especially after my parents divorced 5 years ago. Dad David Thompson was always my rock hard-working patient and genuinely interested in my life. Mom Karen was more distant, caught up in her social circles and appearances. The split wasn't surprising, but the aftermath was nuclear. My relationship with Aunt Laura, Mom's younger sister, had always been strained. Even as a child, I noticed how she'd criticize my choices, from my clothing to my career aspirations. "Architecture isn't practical for someone like you, Mackenzie," she'd say during family dinners. "You've never been good with details." Each comment chipped away at my confidence, but Dad would always counter with encouragement when we got home. My siblings reacted differently to our fractured family. Connor, my older brother by 2 years, became Mom's right-hand man. He was always practical, studying business and following the path our mother laid out. Amber, my younger sister, was 16 when the divorce happened and took it hardest. She retreated into her art and music, but somehow ended up in Mom's orbit, hanging on at Laura's every word about rebuilding a proper family. The divorce itself was a battlefield of accusations and assets. Dad, a civil engineer with his own small firm, wanted a clean split and offered generous terms. Mom, however, listened to Aunt Laura, who insisted he must be hiding money. The proceedings dragged on for nearly a year, with Laura constantly whispering in Mom's ear, turning what could have been amicable into something ugly. "Your father abandoned this family" became Laura's constant refrain to my siblings. Despite Dad showing up to every school event, every medical appointment, every important moment, when the dust settled, Connor and Amber chose to live with Mom in the family home, while I, at 23 and finishing my architecture degree, spent weekends with Dad in his new downtown apartment. Those first few years after the divorce created a canyon between us. Holidays became diplomatic negotiations, with Laura often serving as Mom's spokesperson. "Your mother doesn't think it's appropriate for you to bring your father's new girlfriend to Thanksgiving," she'd call to inform me, though Dad hadn't dated anyone. Or, "We've already made plans that include Connor's girlfriend's family, so there's really no room at the table this year." Each exclusion stung, but Dad never spoke ill of them. "They're still processing," he'd say, making us French toast on Christmas mornings when I couldn't face Laura's annual Christmas Eve dinner. "Family is complicated. Mac just keeps showing up when you can." 4 months ago, I landed my dream job at Evergreen Design, a boutique architectural firm specializing in sustainable urban housing. The hours were long, the learning curves steep, but I was finally putting my degree to work. My first major project was designing affordable, eco-friendly apartments for downtown revitalization. Dad was ecstatic. Mom was politely disinterested when I called to share the news. "That's nice, dear. Did you hear Connor's been promoted to regional manager? We're all so proud." Despite everything, I kept trying. Every few weeks, I'd invite Mom for coffee. I sent Amber tickets to exhibitions I thought she'd enjoy. I even reached out to Aunt Laura when I heard she'd been promoted at the bank where she'd worked for 20 years. Most overtures were met with brief acknowledgments or rain checks that never materialized. So when Mom called in early December with a hesitant invitation to Christmas dinner at Laura's house, I was shocked. "We think it's time to put the past behind us," Mom said, her voice unusually soft. "Laura is making her famous prime rib. Everyone will be there." Everyone, I asked, hopeful yet suspicious. "Well, not your father, obviously," she replied, edge returning to her tone. "But Connor's bringing Stephanie, and Amber is excited to show you her college application portfolio." I spent days considering the invitation, weighing hope against history. For this special occasion, I decided to create personally meaningful gifts for each family member. For Mom, I framed a restored photo of her and Grandma from the 1980s that I'd found in Dad's old albums. For Connor, I found vintage blueprints of the first skyscraper built in our city. He'd been fascinated by it as a kid before business became his focus for Amber. I compiled a portfolio of my own college work, with notes about professors who'd been particularly helpful and spaces on campus where she could find peace to create art even for Laura. I'd chosen something thoughtful, a custom-engraved silver pen for her desk, acknowledging her recent promotion. The engraving read "To New Beginnings," and it was expensive and elegant. Just like everything Laura admired. "You're setting yourself up," Dad warned when I told him about the invitation. "Karen and Laura have a pattern. People can change," I insisted, wrapping Connor's blueprint in silver paper. "It's been 5 years, Dad. Maybe they're ready to move forward." He squeezed my shoulder. "I hope you're right, kiddo. But if things go sideways, you call me. Promise, Christmas or not, I'll be there." I promised, never imagining I'd need to take him up on it. The weeks before Christmas were a whirlwind. At Evergreen Design, our team was racing to finalize the downtown housing proposal before the holiday break, which meant 14-hour days hunched over drafting tables and 3D models. My small apartment, a converted loft in an old textile factory, became little more than a place to shower and occasionally sleep. "You look like you've been hit by a festive freight train," my best friend Jenna observed over our rare lunch break. We'd been friends since freshman orientation, when we both showed up wearing the exact same obscure band t-shirt. She was now killing it as a graphic designer and remained my most honest critic. Deadlines plus family reunions equals zombie Mackenzie. I admitted downing my third coffee, but the project's looking good. Stanton even said my sustainability solutions were elegant. High praise from the robot, Jenna said, referring to our notoriously stoic boss. "But seriously, are you sure about this whole Christmas with the villains thing?" I picked up my salad. "They're not villains, they're family. Family who've spent years making you feel like crap," she countered. "Last Christmas, Laura told you they were full up when you called about dinner. Maybe they've realized life's too short," I said. Mom sounded different on the phone, and I really want to see Amber before she heads to college. Jenna's skepticism was mirrored by my coworker Kyle, who had become a friend after we bonded over late-night pizza and design challenges. Unlike Jenna, who knew all the ugly history, Carl offered a fresher perspective. "Family's complicated," he said, as we calibrated the 3D printer for a model. "My parents didn't speak for 3 years after my sister's wedding disaster. Now they're vacation buddies. See people change," I told Jenna over text, including Kyle's anecdote as evidence. "People can change," she conceded. "Leopards and their spots, though." My recent dating disaster with Jason hadn't helped my overall stress levels. After 3 promising months, he ghosted me only to resurface with a textbook. "It's not you, it's me." Speech. The timing couldn't have been worse, coming just as the holiday loneliness was setting in. Dad had invited me to join him at his colleague Frank's annual Christmas gathering, but I declined once Mom's invitation came through. "You're sure about this?" Dad asked during our weekly dinner at his place. He was making his legendary lasagna, the apartment filled with garlic and oregano. I can still call Frank. His parties are legendary. Last year, his son brought his entire rugby team. I'm sure I said setting the table with the mismatched dishes he'd accumulated since the divorce. "I need to try, Dad. For me, not just for them." He nodded, sliding the bubbling lasagna from the oven. "I got it. Just remember what we talked about. Call if it goes sideways," I recited. "I will, but it won't. I have a good feeling." The day before Christmas, I baked Grandma Thompson's famous bourbon pecan pie, the recipe Dad had taught me during our first post-divorce Christmas. It was a family tradition from his side, one that had disappeared from Laura's Christmas spread after the split. The rich, sweet scent filled my apartment as I carefully packaged gifts and wrote heartfelt cards for each family member. I tried on 4 different outfits before settling on a forest green sweater dress with gold accessories. Festive, but not trying too hard. I wanted to look successful and put together without seeming like I was showing off. The final touch was Grandma Thompson's delicate gold necklace, a graduation gift from Dad, that I rarely wore for fear of losing it. That night, I could barely sleep. Part of me was running through worst-case scenarios, awkward silences, passive-aggressive comments, or being seated at the metaphorical kids' table despite being 28. But another part, the hopeful part that Dad had always nurtured, imagined reconciliation, laughter, and the beginning of a new chapter for our fractured family. "Tomorrow is going to be different," I told my reflection as I finally drifted off. It has to be Christmas morning, dawn bright and clear, sunlight glinting off fresh snow that had fallen overnight. I woke to a flurry of text messages, Jenna sending moral support, and a selfie in her parents' chaotic living room. Carl wishing me luck with family diplomacy, and Dad's simple Merry Christmas, kiddo. Love you, I responded to each while sipping coffee from the handmade mug Amber had given me years ago before the divorce soured. Everything. The ceramic was chipped but still held sentimental value, a reminder of simpler times. Merry Christmas, Dad, I texted back. Heading to Laura's around 4. We'll call tomorrow with full report. Remember, I'm one call away. He responded immediately. No matter what the hours crawled by as I prepared for the evening, I carefully packed the pie in a carrier, arranged the gifts in a festive bag, and took extra time with my makeup and hair. By 3 hours, my stomach was in knots. I checked my appearance one last time. The green dress complemented my auburn hair, which I'd curled softly around my shoulders. Grandma's necklace caught the light, and I touched it for luck before grabbing my coat and heading out. The drive to Laura's suburban home took 40 minutes. My car radio playing Christmas classics that I hummed along to nervously. Her neighborhood was decked out in holiday splendor, synchronized light displays, inflatable snowmen, and wreaths on every door. Laura's house, a large Tudor style, at the end of a cul-de-sac, outshone them all with professional-grade decorations and a massive spruce in the front window, visible from the street. I parked behind Connor's BMW and sat for a moment, gathering courage through the windows. I could see movement and the warm glow of holiday lights. The faint sound of laughter and Christmas music drifted across the snow-covered lawn. Everyone was already inside celebrating without me. New beginnings, I whispered to myself, grabbing the pie carrier and gift bag. The concrete path to Laura's front door had been meticulously cleared of snow and lined with glowing lanterns. My heels clicked against the pavement, announcing my arrival before I even reached the porch. Standing before the imposing oak door with its elaborate wreath, I took a deep breath, shifted the pie to my left arm, and pressed the doorbell. The Westminster chimes echoed inside, followed by a momentary lull in conversation. My heart pounded as footsteps approached. The door swung open, and there stood Aunt Laura in a designer red dress, pearl necklace gleaming at her throat. For one hopeful moment, I thought. Her eyes widened with pleasant surprise. That illusion shattered instantly as her expression morphed into undisguised contempt, eyes rolling dramatically. "We don't want you here," she said, voice cold and clear. "Go ruin someone else's holiday." The words hit like a physical blow behind her. I could see into the warm living room where my family gathered. Mom was adjusting a centerpiece, Connor was pouring wine, and Amber was laughing at something on her phone. A perfect family tableau that clearly had no space for me. I was invited. I managed to say, voice smaller than intended. Mom called. Laura's perfectly manicured hand gripped the door tighter. Karen made a mistake. We discussed it after and decided it would be uncomfortable having you here. Surely you understand. I looked past her again, hoping someone would notice. Intervene. No one even glanced toward the door. Got it, I said finally, nodding and turning away, gifts and pies still in hand. Merry Christmas, I made it halfway down the path before the door clicked shut behind me. Only then did the tears start blurring the cheerful holiday lights into smears of color. Somehow I managed to place the pie and gifts on the passenger seat before collapsing behind the wheel, hands shaking too badly to insert the key. The humiliation burned worse than the December cold. They had discussed me after Mom's invitation, debated my presence like an inconvenience, and collectively decided I wasn't worth including. Worse, no one had the decency to call and cancel. They'd let me shop, bake, dress up, and drive across town, only to be rejected on the doorstep. I finally started the car, backing out of the driveway, with tears streaming down my face in my rearview mirror. Laura's house continued to glow with festive perfection, a Christmas card scene I'd never be part of. As I turned the corner, I pulled over and did something I hadn't done in years. I called my dad, sobbing so hard he could barely understand me. "Mackenzie." "What happened? Are you okay?" They don't want me there," I managed between gulps of air. Laura said. "They all decided after Mom invited me." Dad's voice hardened. "Where are you now?" "Just around the corner." "I can't drive like this. Stay put." "I'm coming. 20 minutes tops." I hung up and sat there crying until I had no tears left, watching happy families through windows of neighboring homes. Christmas lights blurred and doubled through my tears, holiday joy intensifying my isolation. Eventually, I pulled myself together enough to drive to Willow Creek Park a few blocks away. I parked facing the small pond, now frozen and dusted with snow, and waited for my father. The park was deserted on Christmas evening, the playground equipment standing like snow-covered sculptures under the streetlights. I turned off the car but kept the heat running, staring blankly at the frozen pond where ducks would return in spring. The pie that had filled my apartment with warm, spicy scents now sat forgotten on the passenger seat, alongside carefully wrapped gifts that would never be opened. The initial shock was wearing off, leaving something worse in its wake, a hollow, aching recognition. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a bad day. This was the culmination of years of subtle rejection, now made explicit. They had discussed me, weighed my worth as a family member, and found me wanting. Memories surfaced with new, painful clarity. Last Thanksgiving, when Laura accidentally set the table for one fewer person than needed Connor's graduation celebration I'd learned about through Facebook photos. Amber's art show where Mom had introduced me to her friends as Karen's daughter, rather than by name. 100 small cuts that I'd rationalized away, determined to be the bigger person. I reached for my phone, scrolling through family photos I'd saved over the years. In nearly every recent one, I stood slightly apart, already being erased, before I was officially cut out. How had I not seen it? How much time had I wasted trying to earn love from people who had no intention of giving it? The tears returned, but different now. Not just hurt, but fury at myself for being so naive. I'd spent hundreds on gifts they'd never see. I'd changed jobs and apartments, but kept the same family phone plans so Mom could reach me easily. I'd listened to Laura's endless bragging about Connor's accomplishments, while she'd never once asked about my career. I thought about the last conversation with Dad, his gentle warning that I'd brushed aside. He'd seen this coming because he'd experienced it himself, pushed out of his own family by Laura's manipulations and Karen's compliance. Yet he'd never poisoned me against them, always encouraging me to form my own relationships. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenna. "How's it going with the Christmas villains? Need an extraction plan," before I could respond. Headlights swept across the park as a car pulled in beside mine, Dad's reliable old Volvo, the same car he taught me to drive in as a teenager. He stepped out face tight with concern, and I finally broke completely. I stumbled from my car into the freezing air and into his arms, sobbing against his shoulder, like I hadn't done since the night he moved out of our family home. He held me tight, one hand stroking my hair, just as he had when I was small. And the world's injustices seemed fixable. She said they didn't want me there. I choked out. They discussed it after Mom invited me, like I'm nothing to them. Dad's body stiffened, but his voice remained steady. "You are everything, Mackenzie. Everything. They're the ones missing out, not you." We stood there in the cold Christmas lights twinkling in the distance while I poured out every detail. The preparation, the anticipation. Laura's cold eyes, the family tableau I'd glimpsed through the doorway. "I'm such an idiot," I concluded, wiping uselessly at my mascara-streaked face. "You tried to warn me," Dad pulled back, hands on my shoulders. "You're not an idiot. You're someone who believes in family and second chances. That's not foolish. It's brave." He glanced at my car, noticing the pie and gifts. His jaw tightened. "I've respected care and space for 5 years. I've never said a word against your aunt, but this crosses a line." "It doesn't matter anymore," I said suddenly, exhausted. "Can we just go home, watch Die Hard, and pretend this never happened?" Dad checked his watch, expression shifting from concern to determination. "In a minute. First, I need to make a call." He stepped away, the phone to his ear, voice too low for me to hear. When he returned, there was a new energy about him, a decisiveness I recognized from childhood emergencies and work crises. "Change of plans," he announced. "We're going back to Laura's. No way." The mere thought sent fresh panic through me. "Yes, way. This ends tonight." He held up a hand as I started to protest. "Not for them, Mackenzie. For you. 5 years is enough." "I can't face them again," I whispered, shame and hurt warring within me. "You can, and you won't be alone this time." He squeezed my shoulder. "Sometimes the only way past the pain is through it. Trust me on this." Something in his voice. Not anger, but absolute certainty. He studied me. I nodded slowly. "Okay, but if she slams the door in our faces, we're getting ice cream after. Deal," he smiled. A flash of the dad who'd made pinky promises and built blanket forts, and Mackenzie. "I'm proud of you, no matter what happens next." We transferred the pie and gifts to his car, leaving mine in the park as we drove back toward Laura's house. Christmas lights flickering outside the window, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt remained, but beneath it, something harder was forming, a determination not to be diminished any longer. Dad drove with purpose, hands tied on the wheel. "For the record," he said as we turned onto Laura Street, "I've never told you this because I didn't want to influence your relationship with your mother or aunt. But what happened tonight? It's been Laura's playbook since college. She did the same thing to Karen's college friends, to my parents, to anyone she saw as competition for Karen's attention. Why would she see me as competition? I'm Karen's daughter. Dad's side. Laura has always been possessive of your mother. And after the divorce, she needed someone to blame. I was the obvious target. But you chose to maintain a relationship with me, so I'm guilty by association." The pieces were falling into place, creating a picture I'd never fully seen before in Laura's world. Loyalty is absolute. You maintained contact with the enemy. He pulled up across from Laura's house, its Christmas lights now seeming less festive and more like a facade. Ready I wasn't, but I nodded anyway, clutching the pie-like armor as we approached the house that had rejected me less than an hour before. This time, Dad didn't bother with the doorbell. He pounded on the door with enough force to rattle the wreath, his other hand protectively on my shoulder. I stood slightly behind him, heart-hammering hands trembling around the pie carrier. The door swung open, revealing Laura once again. Her smug expression faltered at the sight of my father. "David, what are you doing here?" Her eyes flicked to me, narrowing. "This is a private family gathering." "Exactly," Dad replied. Voice calm but steel-edged. "That's why Mackenzie should be here." Laura's perfectly made-up face hardened. "I think you both should leave before..." "Before what, Laura?" Dad stepped forward, not aggressively, but with unmistakable purpose. "Before the rest of the family sees how you're treating my daughter. Your niece." His raised voice carried into the house. Movement stirred behind Laura as Mom appeared in the hallway, wineglass in hand. Her eyes widened at the sight of us. "David Mackenzie." "What's going on?" Laura turned, blocking Mom's view. "Nothing, Karen. They were just leaving." "Actually," Dad countered, raising his voice further. "We're here because your sister turned our daughter away from Christmas dinner after you invited her." Mom's face registered confusion. "What? I didn't." She looked at Laura, then back to us. "Mackenzie was supposed to come. I set a place for her." The living room had gone quiet. Connor appeared behind Mom, followed by Amber, whose eyes widened at the scene unfolding in the doorway. "Your sister told Mackenzie that the family had discussed it and decided she wasn't welcome." Dad continued, voice tight with controlled anger, "that she should go ruin someone else's holiday." Mom's face drained of color. "Laura, is this true?" Laura's composure slipped momentarily before she recovered. "I was protecting you, Karen. After everything she's put you through, siding with him, criticizing your choices." "I never criticized Mom," I interjected, finding my voice at last. "Never. I've spent 5 years trying to maintain relationships with everyone. 5 years of judgment and disapproval." Laura snapped, always comparing Karen to David, making her feel inadequate. "That's enough," Mom said sharply, surprising us all. She set down her wine glass on a hallway table and moved forward. "Laura, what have you done?" Something changed in Laura's expression, a flicker of panic. "I did what was necessary." She chose him over family. "She didn't choose anyone over anyone," Dad said quietly. "She's been trying to love her whole family. Both sides." Connor stepped forward, frowning. "Aunt Laura, did you really tell Mackenzie we didn't want her here?" "Of course not," Laura scoffed, but her eyes started away. "I simply explained that the timing wasn't ideal." "That's not what you said." I cut in anger, finally overtaking hurt. "You said, and I quote, 'We don't want you here. Go ruin someone else's holiday.'" After I drove 40 minutes with homemade pie and gifts for everyone, Amber pushed past Connor, eyes wide. "You said what Mom invited Mackenzie weeks ago." "We've been talking about it." Laura's facade cracked further. "Amber, you don't understand. After everything that's happened, what exactly has happened, Laura?" Mom asked, voice dangerously quiet. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been making decisions about my relationship with my daughter without my knowledge." The tension in the entryway was thick enough to cut. Neighbors across the street had noticed the commotion, curious faces appearing in windows. "Perhaps we should continue this inside," Mom suggested, tightly glancing at the spectators. Laura moved to block the doorway. "Karen, think about what you're doing. After everything I've done for this family, move, Laura." Mom's voice left no room for argument. Reluctantly, Laura stepped aside. Dad gave my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. As we entered the house I'd been barred from less than an hour ago. The contrast was jarring, from rejection on the doorstep to standing in the warm, cinnamon-scented entryway, adorned with garlands and family photos. Photos that I noticed now conspicuously excluded me in recent years. We moved into the living room, where the Christmas tree glittered with ornaments, many I recognized from childhood. A half-eaten appetizer spread covered the coffee table, and holiday music played softly from hidden speakers. It was picture perfect, except for the palpable tension electrifying the air, said Mom commanded, gesturing to the sofa. Dad and I remained standing. I'd prefer to stand, I said quietly, still clutching the pie. I won't be staying long. Mom's face fell slightly. Mackenzie, please. I didn't know what Dad interrupted, that Laura has been systematically isolating Mackenzie from this family for years, that she's been rewriting history to paint me as the villain. And Mackenzie as my accomplice. That's absurd, Laura snapped, but her usual confidence was cracking. I've only ever told the truth about what happened. What truth would that be? Laura asked, voice dangerously soft. The truth about why Karen and I divorced. The truth about the financial arrangements. You convinced Karen I was hiding, or perhaps the truth about those weekend trips I supposedly took with other women while we were married. Mom's head whipped toward Laura. What is he talking about? Laura's composure faltered. He's manipulating the situation as usual. Karen, we should discuss this privately. No more private discussions, I said firmly. That's how we ended up here, with secrets and whispers and me standing outside in the cold. Connor was watching the exchange with growing discomfort. Aunt Laura has only ever supported us, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. After Dad left, I didn't leave, Dad corrected. I moved out because your mother asked me to. After Laura convinced her I was having affairs. Affairs that never happened. Mom sank into an armchair. Laura told me she had proof receipts. Hotel confirmations, receipts from business trips, Dad said quietly. Hotel stays for engineering conferences that Laura somehow transformed into romantic getaways. I offered to show you the itineraries, Karen. You refused to look because Laura said you'd falsified them. Mom whispered, realization dawning in her eyes. Amber, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. Is that why you always intercepted Dad's letters to me and Laura? You said they were manipulative, and I shouldn't read them. The room went still. Dad's face drained of color. I wrote to you every week for the first year, Amber. When you never responded, I thought. I never got a single letter, Amber said, voice breaking. Not one. All eyes turned to Laura, whose perfectly composed facade was crumbling by the second. I was protecting you all, she insisted, though her voice had lost its edge. He abandoned this family. Stop saying that, I shouted, surprising everyone, including myself. Dad never abandoned anyone. He's been at every important event in my life. He's tried to be at yours too, Connor, Amber. But somehow the details always changed last minute. Or you were told he canceled, or some emergency conveniently arose. Connor frowned, turning to Laura. You told me, Dad said. He was too busy to come to my business school graduation. I called him myself, Laura maintained, but her eye twitched until I recognized from childhood when she was lying. Check her phone, Dad said quietly to Connor. May 15th. 3 years ago, I texted you asking what time I should arrive. You never responded. Connor pulled out his phone, scrolling back through years of messages. His face changed as he found what he was looking for. It's here, and I never saw it. He looked up, confusion clear in his expression. I was using Laura's old phone that month because mine broke. She must have the implication hung in the air. Connor turned to Laura, betrayal written across his features. You read his message and didn't tell me. You let me believe my own father didn't care enough to come. Laura's composure finally shattered completely. I was protecting this family. He cheated on Karen. He abandoned his responsibilities. He turned Mackenzie against all of us. No Laura. Mom's voice was quiet but firm as she stood up. That's not what happened, is it? David never cheated. That was your story. He never abandoned his responsibilities. You manipulated circumstances to make it appear that way. And Mackenzie never turned against anyone. You systematically cut her up because she refused to reject her father. The truth spoken aloud after 5 years of distortion seemed to physically change the air in the room. Amber was crying silently. Connor looked shell-shocked. Mom stood with a straight spine. years of misconception falling away from her face, and Laura composed controlling. Laura finally broke. Everything I did was for you, Karen. He never deserved you. I was the one who stood by you through everything. Not him, not his daughter. My daughter, Mom corrected, stepping toward me. Mackenzie is my daughter, Laura, not some extension of David. She reached for my hand tentatively, and I've been a terrible mother to let this happen. The dam inside me broke at her touch. 5 years of hurt, rejection, and confusion poured out in heaving sobs as Mom pulled me into her arms for the first time in what felt like forever. I'm so sorry, she whispered against my hair. So very sorry. Over Mom's shoulder, I saw Laura's face transform with fury, and something else, a desperate loss of control. This is ridiculous, she spat. You're all falling for their act. After everything I've done, I think, Dad said quietly. It's time for you to leave, Laura. Leave? This is my house. Actually, Mom said, pulling back from our embrace, but keeping an arm around my shoulders. It's my house. I own it. You live here because I invited you after your divorce, and now I'm asking you to go. Laura's face went through a kaleidoscope of emotions. Shock, betrayal, fury, panic. You can't be serious. It's Christmas Eve. Yes, Mom. Agreed. It is. And I'd like to spend it with my children, all of them, and their father, without your interference. Laura looked around desperately for allies, finding none. Connor had moved to stand beside Amber, both watching their aunt with new critical eyes. Dad remained by the door, steady and unmoving, and I stood in my mother's embrace, tear-streaked but finally seen. Fine, Laura snarled, grabbing her purse from the side table. Enjoy your happy family reunion. Don't call me when he disappoints you all again. She stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to shake the ornaments on the tree in her wake. A heavy silence fell over the living room. 5 years of manipulation and misunderstanding hanging between us like invisible smoke. Then unexpectedly, Amber started to laugh. A small hiccuping sound that grew until tears streamed down her face. What's so funny? Connor asked, bewildered. Amber pointed at the pie carrier. I'd somehow managed to hold on to throughout the confrontation. Mackenzie brought pecan bourbon pie. Laura's allergic to pecans. It wasn't really funny, but suddenly we were all laughing at the hysterical, cleansing laughter that comes after emotional devastation in that moment of shared absurdity. Something long broken began tentatively to mend. The laughter gradually subsided, leaving us in an awkward but lighter silence. We stood in a loose circle, 5 people connected by blood and history, but essentially strangers after years of manipulation and distance. Mom was the first to move gently, taking the pie carrier from my hands. You made Grandma Thompson's bourbon pecan, she asked softly. I nodded. Dad taught me the recipe that first Christmas. After everything. A shadow of regret crossed her face. I always loved that pie. Laura convinced me it was too fattening. Laura convinced us of a lot of things, Connor said, running a hand through his hair. A gesture so like Dad's that it made my heart twist. I don't even know where to start sorting truth from fiction anymore. We start here, Dad said quietly. In this moment with honesty. Mom nodded, squeezing my hand. David's right. No more secrets. No more manipulations. She looked around at each of us. I owe all of you an apology, especially you, Mackenzie. I let my own hurt and Laura's influence blind me to what was happening. I failed you as a mother. You didn't fail, I said, though part of me had felt exactly that for years. Laura is persuasive. She always has been. That's not an excuse, Mom insisted. I'm your mother. I should have seen what was happening. Amber, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. I knew something was wrong. Her voice was small but clear. I knew, but I was afraid to say anything. Laura was always there, always watching, always explaining why we should be angry at Dad, suspicious of Mackenzie. She looked at me with tear-filled eyes. I missed you so much, but I didn't know how to reach past all the poison. I crossed to my sister, taking her hands in mine. I missed you too, Ambassador. Every single day. Connor cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional atmosphere, but making an effort. For what it's worth, I didn't know about Laura turning you away tonight. None of us did. When Mom said you were coming, we were all well. I was looking forward to it. Mom nodded. Confirmation, I set a place for you. I even made that cranberry sauce you like. She shook her head in disbelief. Laura must have been watching for you to arrive before any of us noticed. Classic. Laura, move. Dad muttered, then caught himself. Sorry, not helpful. But Mom surprised us by nodding. No, you're right. It was classic Laura. She's been controlling my life all our lives for so long. I stopped seeing it. She straightened her shoulders. But that ends tonight. She turned to Dad with a complexity of emotion on her face. David, I owe you the biggest apology of all the things I accused you of. The way I let Laura turn the divorce into a war. Dad shook his head. That's water under the bridge, Karen. No, she insisted. It's not. It's a dam that's been poisoning everything downstream. We need to break it properly. She took a deep breath. I'm sorry, David. Truly sorry for believing the worst. Instead of what 15 years of marriage should have taught me about your character, Dad's face softened. Thank you. That means a lot. An awkward silence fell until Connor spoke up. So what now? Laura's gone. But she's also been the center of everything for 5 years. Christmas family gatherings, even our regular lives now. I said firmly, finding strength I didn't know I had. We start over right here. I set the bag of gifts on the coffee table. I brought presents for everyone, real ones, not peace offerings or bribes, just gifts from me to my family. Amber's eyes lit up with a glimmer of her old spark. I have something for you too, Mackenzie. I didn't know if I'd ever get to give it to you, but she hurried from the room, returning with a small package wrapped in hand-decorated paper. Seeing this small gesture of hope for my sister, who had been the most distant, something shifted inside me. The hurt wasn't gone. 5 years of rejection doesn't vanish in an hour, but alongside it grew something new: determination. I have a proposal, I said, looking around at my fractured family. Let's leave. Leave, Mom echoed. But we just got you back. Not leave each other, I clarified. Leave this house, Laura's house. Really, it's full of her influence, her rules, her version of our family. Let's go somewhere neutral. Somewhere we can start to find each other again. Dad nodded slowly. My place isn't big, but the tree is up and there's plenty of food. To my surprise, Mom was the first to agree. Let's do it. I can pack up the dinner I prepared. It seems wrong to waste a perfectly good prime rib, even if the evening isn't what we planned. We could do a picnic on the living room floor. Amber suggested, a hint of excitement in her voice, like we used to at the old house when the power went out during storms. Connor, ever practical, added, I can grab the wine and desserts. Maybe stop for ice on the way. Just like that, Laura's perfectly orchestrated Christmas dinner was dismantled. We moved with purpose. Mom and Connor packing food in the kitchen, Amber collecting personal items and gifts, Dad making space in his car for the additional passengers. I found myself in the dining room, looking at the elaborately set table where my place setting was conspicuously absent. Mom appeared beside me. I really did set a place for you, she said softly. Earlier today. It must have been removed while I was in the kitchen. I believe you, I said, and realized I did. But it doesn't matter now. We're making a new table, figuratively speaking. She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes in a way I hadn't seen since before the divorce. You grew up strong and wise, Mackenzie. I wish I could take credit for that. You can take some, I conceded, remembering the good years before Laura's influence took hold. You taught me to stand up for myself. It just turned out I needed to use that lesson within the family. Within 30 minutes, we had packed everything essential into 2 cars, the elaborate decorations, the designer dinnerware, the picture-perfect Christmas tableau, all left behind in favor of mismatched plates and an impromptu celebration. As we stood in the driveway preparing to leave, Mom turned to look at the house one last time. I've let Laura control my life since we were children, she said quietly. Tonight feels like waking up from a very long sleep. It won't be easy, I warned, thinking of the complex unwinding of truths and lies that lay ahead. Laura won't simply disappear from our lives. No, Mom agreed. But she'll never have the same power again. She reached for my hand. I've missed 5 years with my daughter. I won't miss another day. We caravanned to Dad's downtown apartment, a modest 2-bedroom with a view of the river. It wasn't fancy like Laura's suburban showcase, but it was warm and lived in with a small but cheerful tree in the corner and framed architectural drawings on the walls. Some professional, some of my early work from college. You kept these, I asked, touching a frame that held my first design project. Of course, Dad said simply. I'm proud of you. The evening that followed wasn't perfect. There were awkward silences and moments when old hurts flared up. Connor struggled most with the revelations about Laura having been closest to her influence. Amber oscillated between giddy relief and quiet withdrawal as she processed. Mom seemed both lighter and more fragile, like someone recovering from a long illness. But as we gathered around Dad's coffee table with fine china on paper towels, drinking excellent wine from mismatched mugs, something authentic emerged. We shared stories carefully at first, then more openly. I learned about Connor's secret passion for photography hidden, because Laura had deemed it impractical. Amber revealed her application to art school, not the business program. Laura had been pushing. Mom spoke of her interest in returning to teaching, a career she'd abandoned when she married Dad. Laura said it would reflect poorly on the family if I worked as just a teacher. She explained, the quotation marks evident in her tone. Looking back, I don't even know what that meant. It meant she could control you better if you were financially dependent. Dad said, then winced. Sorry, still not helpful. But Mom nodded thoughtfully. No, you're right again. That pattern is so clear now that I'm looking for it. As midnight approached, we opened gifts. Not just the ones I brought, but others hastily gathered from Laura's house. Amber's gift to me was a hand-illustrated book of memories, moments we'd shared as children rendered in her distinctive artistic style. The last page showed two adult women, clearly us, with a blank space between filled with question marks. I wasn't sure we'd ever bridge the gap, she explained shyly. But I hoped I gave her the portfolio of my college work, complete with notes about professors and quiet spaces on campus. For when you start art school, I said. No more hiding your talent. Connor seemed genuinely moved by the vintage skyscraper blueprints. I'd forgotten this obsession, he admitted. Somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking about what I loved and focused on what was expected. Mom cried when she unwrapped the restored photo of her with Grandma. Where did you find this? I thought all these old photos were lost in the move. Dad kept them, I said simply. He kept a lot of things. The evening wasn't a magical fix for 5 years of division. But as we sat in Dad's living room, the lights of the city twinkling beyond the windows and the Christmas tree glowing in the corner, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel that night. Hope not. The desperate hope I'd carried to Laura's doorstep, but something steadier and more grounded. We had taken the first step. We had chosen truth over comfort, confrontation over false peace. We had collectively said enough to the patterns that had kept us apart, and in doing so, we had begun to reclaim not just Christmas, but our family itself. As we prepared to leave around 1 a.m, Mom hesitated at the door. I'm not going back to Laura's tonight, she announced. Or maybe ever. Where will you go? Dad asked. Concern evident. I'll get a hotel for now, she said decisively. Tomorrow I'll start looking for my own place. She looked around at us. I need to figure out who Karen Thompson is without Laura's influence. It's long overdue. Amber and Connor exchanged glances. We'll help you pack tomorrow, Connor offered, and I think I might look for my own place too. I've been saving, but Laura always said it was foolish to waste money on rent. You can stay with me until you find something, Dad offered, surprising us all. Both of you if needed. The sofa pulls out and Mackenzie's old room is available. The offer hung in the air. Not just accommodation, but reconciliation, a bridge across 5 years of absence. I'd like that, Amber said softly, if it's really okay. More than okay, Dad assured her. It's what I've hoped for. As they prepared to leave for the hotel they'd booked on short notice, I pulled Mom aside. This won't be easy, I warned again. Laura won't just accept this new reality. Mom's eyes, so like my own, held a new resolve. I know, but I've lost enough to manipulations. She took my hands in hers. I can't change the past 5 years, Mackenzie, but I can promise you this. Never again will anyone come between me and my children, including Laura. It wasn't everything. It wasn't perfect. But as I watched them drive away, plans made to meet for breakfast the next morning, I knew something fundamental had shifted. The path forward would be complicated, but for the first time in 5 years, there was a path. Dad came to stand beside me at the window. You okay, kiddo? I considered the question. Seriously, not entirely, but I will be. We all will be. He nodded, understanding as always. Bourbon pecan pie for breakfast. I laughed a real laugh, releasing some of the tension I'd carried for so long. Absolutely, it's Christmas after all. 6 months passed after that fateful Christmas night. 6 months of careful rebuilding, painful conversations, and slow healing. Winter melted into spring, and spring bloomed into summer, mirroring the gradual transformation within our family. The first weeks were the hardest. Laura didn't accept her banishment quietly. There were tearful phone calls to Mom, alternating between guilt trips and threats. She showed up at Connor's workplace, claiming Mom was having a breakdown. She sent emails to extended family members, painting herself as the victim of our collective ingratitude. But something had fundamentally changed Mom. With a strength I'd never fully appreciated, stood firm. She found a small but sunny apartment across town, and to everyone's surprise, applied for a teaching position at the local community college. By February, she was Professor Thompson again, teaching English literature to first-year students, and coming home with stories that made her eyes shine in a way I hadn't seen in years. Connor struggled most with the transition. Laura had been deeply embedded in his professional and personal decisions for so long that he initially floundered without her guidance. But by March, he'd started therapy and was asking difficult questions about his career path. "I'm good at business," he confided during one of our now regular coffee meetups, "but I don't know if I love it." I never really asked myself that question before. Amber flourished almost immediately. She moved in with Dad, temporarily taking my old room and filling it with canvases and art supplies. She received acceptance letters from 3 art schools and chose one in the city, allowing her to maintain our newly rekindled relationship. Her artwork changed to less constrained, more vibrant, as if Laura's influence had been literally darkening her palette. Dad remained our study center, offering unconditional support without expectation. He and Mom established a new tentative friendship based on co-parenting adult children through crisis. They would never be a couple again. Too much had happened, but watching them share parenting advice or laugh over shared memories without Laura's poisonous filter was healing in its own way. As for me, the emotional earthquake of Christmas brought unexpected gifts with my family relationships on a healing path. I found new focus at work. I threw myself into the downtown housing project, incorporating elements from both Mom's aesthetic sensibilities and Dad's practical engineering. In April, my designs were selected as the basis for the final project, a professional breakthrough that had me calling Dad in tears of joy. But the personal transformation went deeper. After years of trying to prove my worth to a family that had been manipulated into rejecting me, I finally turned that energy inward. I set boundaries. I started therapy. I cleared out my contact list, prioritizing people who valued my presence rather than those who saw me as an inconvenience. Among those who stayed was Kyle, my coworker, who had offered such simple wisdom before Christmas. Our friendship deepened through late nights, finalizing project details, and by summer had evolved into something more unlike my disastrous relationship with Jason. With Kyle, I never felt I needed to be perfect or apologetic about my complicated family. He simply accepted all of me, messy history included. Laura remained a shadow at the edges of our lives. She moved to another suburb, found a new job, and according to mutual acquaintances, told elaborate stories about our family's dysfunction. Occasionally, she made contact, a birthday card to Amber, a LinkedIn message to Connor, always testing for weaknesses in our newly established boundaries. In June, she showed up unannounced at Mom's apartment. I happened to be there helping Mom hang curtains in her home office. Laura stood in the doorway, designer handbag clutched like a shield, eyes darting between us, as if searching for signs of discord she could exploit. "Karen, we need to talk," she announced, barely acknowledging my presence. "This has gone on long enough." I tensed, ready to intervene, but Mom surprised me. She sat down her coffee cup with deliberate calm and faced her sister directly. "No, Laura. It hasn't gone on nearly long enough," she said firmly. "For years you manipulated me, isolated me, and damaged my relationship with my children. 6 months of independence is just the beginning of my recovery." Laura's composure cracked slightly. "That's not fair. I've only ever wanted what's best for you." "What's best for me," Mom replied, "is having my children in my life. What's best for me is making my own decisions. What's best for me is not having someone constantly tell me how I should feel about my own family." Laura's gaze shifted to me, searching for an ally and finding none. "Mackenzie, surely you can see this estrangement is unhealthy." It was the opening I'd been waiting for without realizing it. My chance to speak my truth directly to the woman who had orchestrated so much pain. "What was unhealthy," I said evenly, "was being systematically cut out of my family because I refused to reject my father. What was unhealthy was watching you manipulate my mother and siblings into believing lies about me. What was unhealthy was standing on your doorstep at Christmas being told I wasn't wanted." Laura flinched at the directness and used to being confronted. "I was protecting the family." "No." I interrupted, 5 years of hurt crystallizing into clarity. You were controlling the family. There's a difference. She had no response to that. After a few more attempts at emotional manipulation that fell remarkably flat, she left. Mom and I finished hanging the curtains, made dinner, and talked about Amber's upcoming art show instead of dwelling on Laura's visit. It wasn't that she couldn't hurt us anymore. She could and sometimes did, but her power over us was broken today. On a warm July evening, we've gathered at my apartment for dinner. It's nothing special, just a regular Wednesday. But that's what makes it precious. The casual weeknight gathering would have been impossible 6 months ago, when every family interaction required Laura's orchestration and approval. Mom brings a salad she's experimenting with. Connor arrives with wine and stories about the photography class he's taking on weekends. Amber shows us sketches for her summer project. Dad calls to say he's running late, but bringing dessert. Kyle moves comfortably among my family, refilling glasses and asking Connor about his latest camera purchase. Looking around at them in perfect healing trying, I feel a fullness that has nothing to do with the meal. The family I longed for during those 5 painful years wasn't a fantasy after all. It was always here, just buried under layers of manipulation and misunderstand. I'm not naive enough to think our journey is complete. We all carry scars from those years. Sometimes old patterns emerge, and we have to consciously choose different responses. Mom still occasionally defers important decisions, looking around as if for approval. Connor can be defensive when his choices are questioned. Amber withdraws when emotions run high, and I still brace for rejection when I reach out. A protective reflex I'm working to unlearn, but we're finding our way back to each other, one honest conversation at a time. We've learned that family isn't automatic. It's a choice you make every day, our relationship you tend with intention and care. We've learned that boundaries aren't walls, but healthy definitions of respect. Most importantly, we've learned that speaking truth, however painful, is ultimately less destructive than comfortable lives. As for me, I've learned that my worth isn't measured by others' willingness to make space for me at their table. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from a table where you're not valued and build your own, inviting those who genuinely want to be present. 6 months ago, I stood on a doorstep with bourbon pecan pie and carefully wrapped gifts, seeking approval from people who had been taught to withhold it. Today, I host dinner in my own space, offering not gifts, but my authentic self, receiving the same in return. It's not perfect, it's better than perfect. It's real. I catch Mom's eye across the room, and we share a smile of quiet understanding. So much lost time, yet somehow exactly where we need to be. Sometimes the longest journey isn't measured in miles, but in the distance between who you are trained to be and who you choose to become. Have you ever had to walk away from something you desperately wanted in order to find what you truly needed? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today, and if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need permission to create their own boundaries this holiday season. Remember, sometimes the people who deserve a place in your life are the ones who never make you question whether you belong in theirs. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your worth isn't determined by those who couldn't see it.